topic. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss uh, that is the components of an ecosystem, right? So that is the components of an ecosystem. The next topic which we are going to discuss today, components of an ecosystem, right? So beta, as far as the components of an ecosystem are concerned, right? So we can say that an ecosystem, right, may have first of all, that is the biotic component and the abiotic component, right? Biotic component as well as the abiotic component. There can be two types of components in an ecosystem, right? Abiotic component. Okay, one is that. And as far as the abiotic component is concerned, right? So abiotic components can be the, right, can be the, we can say, right, physical elements, right, can be the physical elements or can be the chemical elements there, right, can be the chemical elements there. Okay, so that means the physical non-living environment and the chemical non-living environment, right? So that can be there. And as far as the biotech component of the ecosystem is concerned, right? So the biotech component can be further categorized into two, right? So one is, we can say, the autotrophs. Oh, this is the one component, right? And the second component we can say, that is the heterotrophs, right? So then we will discuss all these points one by one. Autotrophs and the we can say this that heterotrophs, right? And the next thing is the autotrophs can be autotrophs can be we can say photoautotrophs, or those can be the chemo autotrophs, right? Those can be the photoautotrophs, right? Photoautotrophs, or those can be the chemoautotrophs, chemoautotrophs, right? So that can be there. Chemoautotrophs can be there, right? So as far as the heterotrophs are concerned, right? So the heterotrophs can be, we can say, right, of the two types mainly, right? Heterotrophs are the two types mainly. Okay, so one type of the heterotrophs is, we can say, that is the consumers, right? Consumers. And the second type of the heterotrophs, we can say, that is the decomposers. Okay, the second type of the heterotrophs is the decomposers, right? So as far as the consumers are concerned, right, so there are further different categories of the consumers, right? So these are the one, two, three, and we can say the four categories of the consumers I am taking here, right? Four categories of the consumers, right? So one category of consumers is known as the herbivores, right? Herbivores. And the second category of consumers, that is known as, we can say, the carnivores, right? And the third category of consumers is known as the omnivores, right? And the fourth category of consumers is known as the, that is, we can say, right, detritivores, right? Detritivores also, right? So detritivores also. So these are the various categories of the consumers, right? And I think it is clear to you that this is all about the components of an ecosystem, right? So an ecosystem consists of first of all the two uh, right types of the objects. Biotic means living objects, abiotic means non-living objects, right? So then there are autotrophs. Biotic can be categorized into autotrophs and the heterotrophs. And the autotrophs can be categorized into photoautotrophs and chemoautotrophs. And the heterotrophs can be categorized into consumers and deconsumers, right? Consumers can further be categorized into herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and we can say detritivores, right? And as far as the biotic component is concerned, right? So a biotic component may be consisting of the physical elements and it may be consisting of the chemical elements as well, right? So first of all, we will discuss about the physical elements or the physical factors of the, we can say, a biotic component of the ecosystem, right? So physical elements or the physical factors of the abiotic component of the ecosystem, right? So as far as the physical components or the physical factors are concerned, right? So these includes, we can say, the light. These includes light, that is the air, right? That is the temperature, that is the rainfall or precipitation, we can say, right? So whatever name you can give, that is the rainfall or precipitation. That is fire, right? That is water, right? So all these are the physical elements of the abiotic component of the environment, right? So as far as the chemical components of the abiotic or the chemical elements of the abiotic component of environment are concerned, those include, like we can say, right? Those include the, like we can say, that is the pH value, right? pH value of a substance, right? So next is the chemical composition of the air, we can say, right? Composition of air, whether there is abundance of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, right? In what proportion the gases are existing, that is there, right? So level of salinity, we can say, right? Level of salinity. So nutrients content, what is there, right? And then you can say a moisture in air, right? Moisture in air. So, right? So pollution in air, we can say, right? Pollution in air or presence of toxic substances, we can say, right? The chemical composition of the soil also, right? So that is also, so the presence of the oxygen in, we can say, the aquatic ecosystem in the water bodies, because there also the life need oxygen, right? So a biotic means physical elements as well as the chemical elements. I have told you that what are the physical elements and what are the chemical elements there. Okay, so now we are coming on to the this abiotic component of the ecosystem, right? So as far as the abiotic component of ecosystem is concerned, uh, this uh, this component, biotic component, means that we can say living objects there in a particular ecosystem, right? Biotic related with life means the living objects, right? So one part of the biotic components, that is the, we can say, autotrophs, right? So autotrophs, auto means self, right? Trophs. Autotrophs are those organisms that prepare their food themselves, right? That prepare their food to meet their energy needs them themselves, right? So basically what do they do? They, we can say, synthesize the inorganic compounds, simple inorganic compounds, into the, we can say, organic ones, right? So वो क्या करते हैं, सिंपल इनऑर्गेनिक कंपाउंड्स को वो फर्दर ऑर्गेनिक कंपाउंड्स में उसको वो सिंथेसाइज करते हैं, राइट? एंड thus they meet their energy requirements, right? So this is the characteristic of the, we can say, autotrophs, right? That is why they are called the, we can say, autotrophs, because they don't depend on the other organisms to meet their food requirements, right? They prepare their own food, they synthesize or they convert the simple inorganic, we can say, that is the compounds into the, we can say, organic compounds, right? And hence they meet their energy needs, right? So autotrophs are further of two types. One is, we can say, the photoautotrophs, and the second is known as the, that is the chemo autotrophs, right? So as far as the photoautotrophs are concerned, right, most of the organisms you will find on the planet, right, particularly the, we can say, terrestrial ecosystem. Terrestrial means those organisms which are living on land, not in water, right? So the most of the organisms in the terrestrial ecosystem, they are the, we can say, photoautotroph, right? Photoautotroph means they, we can say, right, so they prepare their food by the process of the photosynthesis, right? By the process of the photosynthesis, right, actually उनके अंदर क्लोरोफिल होती है, राइट, और वो सनलाइट की प्रेजेंस में फिर वो क्लोरोफिल को कन्वर्ट करते हैं एनर्जी में, और वो अपना फूड इस तरीके से प्रिपेयर करते हैं, राइट? सो वी कैन से द ऑटोट्रॉप्स, right? The photoautotrophs I am telling, the photoautotrophs are those organisms who do photosynthesis, right, to prepare their food, to meet their energy needs, we can say, right? So the various green plants which we see, they are the photoautotrophs actually, right? And similarly, in the, we can say, aquatic ecosystem also, where the light can penetrate up right up to which depth. So in a particular layer of water where the light can penetrate, we can say, right, photoautotrophs exist there in the, we can say, aquatic bodies as well, in the ocean bodies as well, in the seas as well, we can say, right? So the important photoautotrophs in the water bodies, those can be the phytoplanktons, right? So those can be what? Those can be the phytoplanktons, right? So I'm telling you, those can be the phytoplankton, okay? Phytoplanktons, right? So uh, phytoplanktons. Phyto means plants, right? Plankton means those which drift or wander, right? So phytoplankton. So I'm telling you that phytoplankton is a combination of two words, right? So one word is the phyto. Phyto means plants, right? Phyto means plants. And the second word is the planktons, right? So first, phyto means plants, okay, plants. And the second is the planktons. Planktons means that is the uh, planktons, right? Those planktons, right? So plankton means those that are drifting or wandering, right? Plankton means those that are drifting or wandering, right? Drifting or wandering, or wandering, right? So beta, there are right, there are many small microorganisms in the water bodies. Please note it. There are many small microorganisms in the water bodies that we can say, right, that are like plants also, and they don't remain fixed at one particular place, right? They keep on moving on the surface of the water, so that is why they are known as the phytoplanktons, right? So phytoplanktons, we can say, right, are the microorganisms living in the water. Please note it. Phytoplanktons are microorganisms living in water, right? So phytoplanktons may include, right, we can say bacteria, right? Some single-celled plants as well, some single-celled plants as well, phytoplanktons, right? And the phytoplanktons do have the Phytoplanktons do have the chlorophyll, like the plants on the land. They have the chlorophyll as well. So we can say that is why they do photosynthesis. They make their food themselves by the process of the photosynthesis, we can say, right? So this is important point. Okay, so photo autotroph, and similarly, there are, we can say, the chemo autotrophs as well, right? So chemo autotrophs are those organisms that do not do photosynthesis, right? But they prepare their food, right, by the chemical reactions, with the use of the chemical reactions, or by using the chemical energy, right, in their bodies, right? So beta, that means the photoautotrophs are those that prepare their food in the presence of the sunlight, and chemoautotrophs are those that make their food, right, by using the chemical energy, right? So they do not do photosynthesis, right? So beta, it means there can be two types of the, we can say, ecosystems, or there can be two types of the physical spaces, right? So one physical space is that where the sunlight is there, right? It means sunlit ecosystems, right? The sunlit ecosystems will be dominated by the photoautotrophs, right? So maximum production there will be done by the photoautotrophs, right? And there can be the another type of the ecosystem, right, which is not, we can say, sunlit, where the light of the sun cannot penetrate. So those ecosystems, right, are, we can say, obviously dominated by the chemoautotrophs, right? So chemoautotrophs can prepare their food, can make their food even in the absence of the sunlight. They don't require sunlight to make their food. So I think this point is clear to you, that what is the, we can say, autotrophs, right? Chemo autotrophs and photoautotrophs, we have discussed the two important things, right? So next is the heterotrophs, right? So heterotrophs are those organisms that cannot synthesize their food, राइट? वो ऑर्गेनिज्म जो अपना फूड खुद नहीं प्रिपेयर कर सकते, राइट? सो दे दैट कैन नॉट synthesize, we can say, right, the organic nutrients which they require to meet their energy needs, right? So that means heterotrophs are those who do not prepare their own food, right? But they depend on the, we can say, autotrophs for their energy requirements, for the requirements of their food, right? For the requirements of their food, right? So beta, these chemoautotrophs are very small organisms, right, which exist in those environments where the light is not available. So they can see in the deep water ecosystems, we can see, right? So they are not common beta, right? So that is there. So now the we are discussing about the heterotrophs, right? So heterotrophs are those organisms who cannot make their own food, right? So who are unable to synthesize the, we can say, organic nutrients which they require to meet their uh, energy needs, right? Which they require to meet their energy needs, right? So because that is why they feed on the tissues of, right? They feed on the tissues of the plants, right? Or we can say the other, we can say, organisms, right? So heterotrophs, what they do, they feed on the tissues of plants, right? They feed on the tissues of other organisms, right? Tissues of other organisms, right? So now the point is that here, those, we can say, the other organisms, right, from the one category, or from the one point of view, we can say that, right, those other organisms, right, may be the producers, or maybe the consumers, right? So one is, we can say in this way, those other organisms may be the producers or maybe the consumers, right? Like we can say, right, the plants are the primary producers and we are the consumers because we cannot make our own food, right? We depend on the plants to meet our food requirements, or we depend on the, we can say, other we can say animals also to meet our requirements of the food, right? So beta, that is why we are consumers, right? So now what is there? The heterotrophs are those organisms, right, who feed on the tissues of the producers, means plants, or the consumers. Consumers means the other, we can say, okay, animals, right? So they feed on that, right? So that is the point, right? Like we can say the snake eats the rats, right? Rats. So it means a snake depends on the consumers, not depend on the producers, right? So, right. So when the snake is eating a rat, that means snake is eating a consumer because rat is also a consumer. Rat does not make its own food, right? So beta, rat also depends on some other organisms for its food requirements. Okay, so that is there, right? Or otherwise we can say that, we can say the heterotrophs, right, are those organisms which depend for their food requirements on plants or on the other animals, right? Those who depend on their food requirements for plants, sorry, on plants or on some other animals, right? Or on some other animals. Okay, so beta, that is there. Okay, so plants or some other animals, so they depend on the others for their food requirements. Okay, so now beta, that is why the heterotrophs can be categorized into two. One is the consumers and second is the decomposers, right? So consumers can be the herbivores, right? Herbivores are those organisms that, we can say, depend for their food requirements on the primary producers, that is the vegetables, means vegetation, and the plants, right? So clear. So those are the herbivores. They don't eat the, right, or they don't consume the, we can say, other animals, right, for the purpose of their food requirements. So they are called the herbivores, right? Like we can say cow, right? So cow, right, for its food requirement depend on the grass only, right? So cow doesn't eat, we can say, other animals, like it cannot eat rats, so it cannot eat lizards, right? Or it cannot eat lambs, or it cannot eat rabbits, etc., right, for its food requirement. So that is why those are called the herbivores, right? So we can say that herbivores are those organisms that feed directly on the plants. Those are called the herbivores, right? And second is the carnivores, right? So carnivores are those organisms, right, that feed on the, we can say, other animals, right, for their feed, for their food requirements, or they, right, or they, we can say, depend on the herbivores for their food requirements, right, for their food requirements, right? Like we can say, like snake is there, right? So beta, snake eats rats, let's suppose, huh? So then in that case, snake is a carnivorous, right? Similarly, lizard is there, right? So beta, वो जो lizard होती है, right? So वो lizard भी है ना, छोटे मोटे जो आपके जो पेस्ट वगैरह है, राइट? सो उनको वो खाती है. So beta, that is why lizard is also a carnivorous, we can say, right? And there is the omnivorous, right? So omnivorous are those organisms that depend for their food requirements on the plants as well as on the animals, right? Animals means herbivorous as well as on the carnivorous also, right? So that means omnivorous are those that depend for their food requirement on the primary producers, or you can say producers, right? On primary producers as well as on the consumers, that is the herbivores or the carnivores. Okay, so it means omnivores are those, right? So now the point is that, right? So omnivores are those that eat both the plants as well as the animals. Those are called the omnivores. You all know about this, right? So now the next thing is beta. That is, we can say that is the, here is the detritivores, right? So now the detritivores, what is that? Detritivores beta, there is one thing. See, there can be dead organisms. One point is here, which I am writing here, right? So there can be dead organisms, right? Organisms, dead organisms, maybe plants, maybe animals, right? Or dead parts of the organisms also, like leaves of the plants, right? Branches of the plants, etc., etc. Dead organisms, right? And there can be the waste of, right? There can be the waste of living or once living organisms. Living or once living organisms, there can be the waste of those also, right? Waste of those also, right? So now beta, what is the point? Dead organism, sorry, detrivores are those organisms, right? So who depend for their food requirement on this, either on dead organisms or on the waste of the living or once living organism. Waste is the fecal matter, we can say, right? So they depend on that also, detritivores, right? And now the decomposers, right? So the next important point is the decomposers, we can say, right? So now as far as the decomposers are concerned, right? So beta, you can say that decomposers, right, are the heterotrophs, right? So that feed on the dead organic matter, that feed on the dead organic matter. Please bear this in mind. Decomposers are those that feed on the dead organic matter. Okay, dead organic matter. I think you are getting what I am teaching. They feed on the dead organic matter. The point is this, right? So now the point is that beta, what is the difference between the detritivores and the decomposers, right? So why are there two different terms? One term is detritivores and the second term is the decomposers, right? What is the difference between the two? Do you know that what is the difference between the two? Hello, do you know that what is the difference between the two? Hmm? Yes, please tell me. Okay, Amrit is no. Asika is no. Okay, okay, okay. So now, beta, the difference between the detritivores and the decomposers is that, right? So one type of organisms are those organisms, right? I am writing it, you can see here, right? One type of the organisms are those organisms that eat the dead matter, right? Or the waste matter of living organisms, right? That eat the dead matter, right? And there can be the other category, right? That eat the dead matter, right? Take into their body, eat the dead matter, right? Take into their body, take into their body, right? Their body, and and digest it there, digest it there. There means in their body. Okay, this is the one type, right? And the second type of organisms are those organisms, right, beta, who, those organisms who secrete, right, who secrete certain enzymes, right, who secrete certain enzymes, enzymes, right, enzymes, they, right, certain enzymes, they decompose the dead matter, right, outside their body. They decompose the dead matter outside their body. Okay, dead matter outside their body. Okay, outside their body, right? Outside their body means we can say digest outside their body, right? Outside their body, right? And then consume it, and then eat it or consume it, right? So this is the main difference better. Okay, so I think uh, first of all, these are the 2 points which I have just told you, right? So one is those, right? One is those that eat the dead matter or the waste matter, right? Carry it into their body, right? Digest it there, right? Digest it there. So one type of organisms are those, right? Organisms are those. And the second type of organisms are those, right? Who? Second type of organisms are those, right, beta, who digest the dead matter outside their body, right? Outside their body, and then take it into their body, right? So, beta, those organisms who eat the dead matter or the waste matter, right, in their body, you, sorry, who eat the dead matter or waste matter and then digest it in their body, right? Take it into their body, and then we can say digest it there, right? Like we can say earthworms are there, right? Earthworms are there, dung beetles are there, right? So dung beetles, right? So beta earthworms and dung beetles, who are they, right? They actually, some bees are there, right? Who, right? They actually eat the, we can say, dead matter, carry it into their body, and then digest it there, right? So beta, these organisms are known as the, we can say, detritivores, right? Who are these organisms? These organisms are known as the detritivores. I think this will remain in your memory now, right? So they are the detritivores. Okay, detritivores, right? And there is the second category, right? What about the second category is there? They actually secrete the enzymes, right? Digest it outside their body and then carry it into their body. They are the decomposers basically, right? So they are the decomposers basically, right? Some bacteria and fungi fall in this category, right? So they are the decomposers, right? Some bacteria and fungi are of this category, decomposers. Okay, so I think this point is clear to you now, that what is the difference between the detritivores and the decomposers, right? Detritivores and the decomposers. So this point is clear to you, I think now, right? Okay, and there are certain, we can say, and there are certain uh, other components or certain other terms are also there which are used with this, right? So those other terms are, right? So some organisms are known as the, we can say, saprotrophs. Saprotrophs, right? So what is saprotrophs? Saprotrophs are those organisms, right? Saprotrophs are those heterotrophs, we can say, right? Heterotrophs are those organisms, we can say, right? So that obtain their food or nutrients, right? That obtain their food or nutrients, right? From the non-living organic matter, right? From the non-living organic matter. Okay, from the non-living organic matter. Okay, from the non-living organic matter, right? That is the dead plants or dead animals, right? That is the dead plants or dead animals, right? So for them, one term is used, that is the, we can say, that is the saprotrophs, right? Actually, they absorb the soluble organic compounds, right? So what do they do? They absorb the soluble organic compounds. They absorb the soluble organic compounds. Soluble organic compounds. Okay, so that is basically that point, right? So this is there. So now the next term, which is there, one term is this, that is the saprotrophs, right? And the second term is there, which is the phagotrophs, Phagotrophs, right? Second term is the phagotrophs. So now, what are the phagotrophs, right? So phagotrophs are those heterotrophic organisms, right? Are those, right, heterotrophic organisms, okay, organisms that we can say depend for food, that depend for food on the solid organic matter, on the solid organic matter. So they depend for their food on solid organic matter, right? So they, right, obtain their food from the solid organic matter, right? And the next term which is there, that is the, we can say, osmotrophs, right? Osmotrophs, right? So osmotrophs are those organisms, those heterotrophic organisms that depend for food on the, we can say, right, on the uh, organic matter, right, which is, we can say, present in the solution, right, on organic matter present in solution, okay, organic matter present in solution. So they depend for food on that, right, present in solution, okay. So they depend for their food requirements on that, right? And the next term which we use, that is the parasite, parasite, right? So who are the parasites basically, right? So parasites are those heterotrophic organisms that obtain their, right, that obtain their energy, right, or obtain their nutrients. Those heterotrophic organisms, those heterotrophic organisms that that obtain nutrients from the, living biomass, okay, from the living biomass, right, like mosquito is there, right, from the living biomass. So this is there, these are the other terms there, right? So so far we have discussed in this section of the lecture about the components of the ecosystem, right? So as far as the components of the ecosystem is concerned, I have told you that there are two types of components: biotic components, living components, and the abiotic components means non-living components. Biotic components, in that we have discussed that there are physical factors, physical elements, as well as there are the chemical elements also. I told you about that also. And then the biotic component of the of the ecosystem. Biotic component, in that we include that there are, you can say, the different, right, types, right. So what is that? There are the autotrophs who make their food themselves, and there are the heterotrophs, right, who depend on others for their food requirements, who cannot make their food themselves, right. So yes, beta, I'm coming, right. So who, right. So beta, uh, I'm coming on your question that in which category vultures fall. Good question. I'm coming, right. So we have discussed that. the biotech component of the ecosystem, right, includes the autotrophs, that is the producers. They are known as the primary producers, basically, right, are the producers, and the consumers, that are the heterotrophs, are the consumers, right? So as far as the autotrophs are concerned, there are the two categories of autotrophs. One is the photoautotrophs, second is the chemoautotrophs. Right, the photoautotrophs are those who do photosynthesis to meet their energy requirements, and the chemoautotrophs are those, right, so who use the chemical energy, right, to make their food. So that is there, right? So I told you that in the sunlit, you can say ecosystem, right? So there will be the dominance of the photoautotrophs, and in that ecosystem where the sunlight cannot penetrate, where there is absence of the sunlight or lack of the sunlight, right? Very less sunlight is there. So in that ecosystem, there will be the dominance of the chemoautotrophs, I told you, right? And then the heterotrophs, in that we discussed that there are two categories. One is category of consumers, and second category is that of the decomposers, right? So consumers are those, right? Uh, Consumers are further of the four types I told you. One is the herbivorous, right? Second is the that is the carnivorous, right? And third is the omnivorous, and fourth is the, we can say, detritivores, right? So detritivores, I told you, are those, right, who eat the dead matter or the waste of the living or once living matter directly, right? Carry that into their body and then digest it there, right? And then the decomposers are those, right, who release certain enzymes. They digest the dead matter outside their body and then take it into their body. This is the difference, right? So as far as the vultures is concerned, vultures fall in the category of the, we can say, detritivores, right? Detritivores, right? Because they eat directly the dead organic matter, right? And then they carry it inside their body and they further digest it there in their body, right? So they don't release enzymes to uh, digest the food outside their body. Is your point clear? Is your doubt clear, Amrit? ठीक है. So beta, that is the point, right? So vultures fall in this category, right? And now further important point is there, beta, that we can say there at the various trophic levels, right? There are the various trophic levels, right, in an ecosystem. So as far as the various trophic levels are concerned, let me tell you, there are various trophic levels, right? So one is the first trophic level is that of the producers, right? So first trophic level is that of the producers, okay? That of the producers, right? That is at the bottom, at the first trophic level, right? Because if there would be no producer, no plants, there would be no life on this earth, right? And the second is that is called the primary consumers, right? That is called the primary consumers. They are at the second trophic level, right? There are the primary consumers, right? So primary consumers, who are they? They are basically the herbivores, right? Herbivores are the primary consumers because they depend directly on the plants, right? Not on the other animals. And then there is the third trophic level. In the third trophic level, there are the, we can say, right, secondary consumers. There are the secondary consumers, right? So because secondary consumers are known as the primary carnivores also. Primary carnivores also, right? Primary carnivores also, right? Because they they depend on the primary consumers for their food requirements. That is the herbivores for their food requirements, right? And then there is the fourth trophic level. Fourth trophic level are known as the tertiary consumers, right? Tertiary consumers, right? So they are known as the secondary, right? Secondary carnivores as well, right? Secondary carnivores as well. So accordingly, there can be the trophic levels in an ecosystem, right? So please bear this in mind, right? So primary carnivores are those heterotrophic organisms that depend for their food requirements on the herbivores, right? And then secondary carnivores are those organisms, right, that depend on for their food requirements on the primary carnivores or on the secondary consumers, right? So please bear this in mind. So this is about the various, we can say, trophic levels there, right? Various trophic levels, right? Like we can say grass, right? Let me give you an example. Here we are taking the example of grass, right? What is grass, beta? Grass is the primary producer, right? Grass is the primary producer, right? Because it makes its food itself, right? It's converts the, right? We can say the in ऑर्गेनिक कंपाउंड्स इनटू द ऑर्गेनिक कंपाउंड्स सिंथेसाइज करता है, अपना फूड प्रिपेयर करता है, डायरेक्ट फोटोसिंथेसिस करता है, राइट? ये किसी और मटेरियल को नहीं कंज्यूम करता, राइट? सो ग्रास इज द प्राइमरी प्रोड्यूसर, राइट? सो नाउ बेटा व्हाट इज देयर? Grass is further eaten by the grasshopper, right? Let me take it here that grasshopper depends on grasshopper, right? So what is grasshopper? Grasshopper is the primary consumer, right? It is the herbivores, right? So now beta, next to that, right, grasshopper is further, say, eaten by a rat. Grasshopper is eaten by a rat, right? Eaten by a rat. So what is right? So now what is rat? Rat is a secondary consumer, right? Which is known as the primary carnivorous because it you can say eats the grasshopper, right? And now the rat is further eaten by the snake, right? Rat is further eaten by the snake, beta. And what is and what is snake? What is snake? Now, beta, right? What is snake? Snake is basically, snake is the that is the tertiary consumer, right? And it is the secondary carnivorous, right? Who depends for its food requirement on the primary carnivores, right? So accordingly, there are the various trophic levels in an ecosystem, we can say, right? So yeah, that is there. Okay. So please bear this in mind, right? So this point is a further important point there, right? So this is there. So now, beta, now uh, this is about the today's lecture. I think I should close today's lecture here only, right? So we'll discuss further in the next lecture, right? So productivity, etc. we'll discuss in the next lecture, right? So in today's lecture, we have discussed two important things. One is the ecosystem. What is the ecosystem, meaning of the ecosystem, and the second is the various components of the ecosystem. We have discussed these two important things. Okay. So I hope this is clear to you. If anybody has any doubt, please tell me. Hello. If you